What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. In the last video, we took apart the head for the 1GZ IS300. We're getting it all buttoned up to refresh the valve seals, getting it all rebuilt, and throwing some upgrades while we're here, like some AirP head studs, oil cooler, ABS delete, you name it, we're gonna be doing it. I'm also a lone wolf today, the boys aren't here. We've been looking for a new machine shop for a while, and we were able to find one pretty local to us. So I was able to take my 1JZ head, S54 head, and we dropped off Nick's 2JZ. Nick's engine is going to obviously take a lot longer because the machine shop is going to be doing the block 2. I got an ETA for about 2 to 3 weeks, which is good because even with that time frame, I'm not going to be having the head in there. I still want to do a lot more. So I started brainstorming on things that I can work on today, and it's time to work on the engine harness. For those of you that don't know, I'm running a 2JZ GE harness on the 1JZ. Kind of weird, but it works. And that's why these engines work so flawless for these cars. Since I was in such a time crunch, I didn't really clean it up. I thought might as well pull this whole harness completely out and show you guys how to clean up your harness, because I've been learning so much more, especially with that hard body, that it gets me super excited to work on engine harnesses and start building them one day. This harness is an absolute mess, so I know it's going to clean up really well. So I'll be showing you the tips and tricks on how to get your engine harness cleaned up and re-lubed without spending a ton of money. First things first, I gotta rip out the harness. So a couple connectors left and it should be out. Most of the harness is out. Now the only things remaining is going to be the connectors on the exhaust side of the harness. So alternator, all the wires going to the fuse box, the oxygen sensor wiring. The reason why I'm stopping here to show you guys that is because this part of the harness is where I'm gonna want to extend. If you guys know IS300s, they tend to have a harness that runs down under the intake box, but now that I don't have the GE and I have the 1JZ, it's just a bulky harness that looks ugly, and I want to be able to run it through the valve covers, out through the back. These are the connectors for the oxygen sensors. I'm going to need these because Link set the pinouts to be used for certain things like ethanol sensor, boost controller, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be located here. This is all factory. This is factory. Then you start getting to here. This is where I touched. So right now I'm gonna be heading over to the workbench, showing you what tools and materials I'm gonna be using, and get to work on this thing. All right guys, let's get to it. Super exciting stuff. Time to rip apart this janky old engine harness, and let me show you guys what I'm gonna be using in order to do that. I feel like I laid everything out that I'll most likely touch at least once. All right guys, let's get to the tools that we're gonna be using. First things first, how are we gonna be cutting open this harness? We're gonna be using just the generic blade. This is something that you gotta be careful with. When you're cutting the harness open, you wanna make sure that you don't cut into the wire itself. You don't wanna create an electrical issue later down the road if you damage the wire, and you definitely don't wanna have to rip apart this harness again. So just make sure you're gentle and you take your time. After we have the harness completely stripped apart and we just have nothing but bare wires, while I'm stripping the harness down, what I'm gonna be using is some zip ties. Obviously connectors start branching off everywhere and it becomes just like a spider web. Unless you're extending the wires, you want to keep the original location. So what I'm going to be doing is at the point where they branch off, I'm going to be zip tying each branch so I know exactly where they split and how they split. So that's going to be the easiest method, and we're going to be using some zip ties. You have the wires branched out where you want to go. What's next? Well, time to clean things up. You can just use a generic microfiber, little bit of rubbing alcohol, and just start wiping everything down. Try to get rid of excess grease or oil that got onto the harness. Aside from that, we have to start inspecting the connectors. If you have a broken connector, just label it, put a piece of tape on it, so you know what you need to replace, what you need to depin, splice in, whatever repair method you're going to be using. Most of these connectors are good or have been replaced. The only ones that I need to be replacing are the injector connectors. I fucked up big time when I took it to the dyno because it was my first time crimping things with an open barrel crimper, and that affected me really badly because I was having a misfire all the way there. The tuner had to help me fix it, and even then, there are still some connectors that are loose and have popped off. These are for Bosch injectors. And I was able to source this locally here at Quantum. These are properly crimped, these are good to go, and I shouldn't have any issues. You can just crimp them yourself, which I could have done, but this was a lot cheaper, and I was able to get these within a day because Quantum Fuel Systems, they're actually located here in Ventura, which is nuts because I can literally call them up, give them a part number, and go and pick it up. Now going into the harness extension. You wanna make sure you're using the same size gauge wire and you're using good quality wire. The thing about some Amazon and eBay wiring is they corrode and they wear out and they're just cheap. I wanted to pick a color aside from red and black, so I know that I actually touched that part of the harness just in case I need to open it up again. So I'm gonna be going with just white wire. Hooking everything up, you can either go with some of these butt connectors that you can crimp down and it has heat shrink on them. I like these, but my favorite, my all-time favorite is these BMW open barrel crimps. These things work so well, but they are pretty expensive. I'll make sure to put the part numbers down below if you guys want to use these, help you guys out. But they don't really go to really big sizes and you really don't need them to go that big anyways. But they're about $1 a piece, $40 worth of open barrel crimps, but it's so worth it. With all the wiring repair that I've done at BMW, I trust these way more than any other wiring repair method. I have another pair of these, the first ones I bought, but they don't open up evenly like this one does. So when you want to crimp down, they crimp down even and perfect. So I really like these, and I'll show you what I'm talking about with the other pair. This one is from Matco, and it does work decently well, but you can see they open up at an angle, whereas these open up evenly. As far as crimping everything down, I used to use just a generic set of some snap-on wire crimpers, and these work amazing. I seen some guy online use this style, and they work so well, so I just picked these up yesterday. These are Blue Point, so just a cheaper version of Snap-on, and it pulls them out evenly and perfect. The last two things are gonna be heat shrink and Tesa Tape. Buy yourself Tesa Tape over 3M tape. The fabric is super beautiful, super nice, and when you do it well, this is all you really need, and it makes the harness look so much better because the nice flat color and the fabric is a little bit rough, so it has a nice texture to it. That's really all I'm gonna be using, guys. Now that we're done with the materials and tools, let's get to the exciting stuff. Start ripping apart this harness. Alright guys, after 2 hours, the harness is stripped. With Junior single cam, it was super easy, super simple, only a couple wires. With all the wires visible, now I can inspect the harness and see what needs to be replaced, what wires need to be repaired. I did note down some of the wires. This one got a little too hot and now the wire is fraying, just due to normal engine heat. And that's what happens with old harnesses, is over time they get really hot and they start cracking. So with that one, the wires are exposed. So instead of just trying to tape it up, I'm gonna be cutting it and replacing the actual wire just so it doesn't get worse over time. If this is your first time doing something like this, or it's your first time pulling out a harness in general, I would definitely recommend noting everything down, where all the connectors go, what they go to, because if you don't, you're gonna get very confused. I already have an idea where everything's gonna go, so I didn't need to do that. And I've worked on JZs a couple times already to know where everything, goes for the most part. When you can see the rubber insulation coming out, that means that you or whoever else did the harness did not crimp the insulation right. So that's when these things just tend to pop out. This is what prevents water and oil from getting into the connector and going into whatever sensor is plugged in, and that can cause issues. But that's why we have all these pigtails to just wire in. And the good thing about stripping the harness up to this point is that you're gonna have way more room and length of wire to work with, so you might not need to extend wires like you thought you would. I cleaned up most of the connectors. The only ones that I didn't clean up was obviously the ones that I'm going to be replacing. guys want to see how the harness looks inside the car, looks like a disaster. A whole spider web of wires. I know I'm gonna have to be deleting certain things like this guy that goes to the evap and emissions. These are the connectors for the oxygen sensors, and I'm not gonna have to extend any wires because I could pull it all out and run it through the back. I made sure I had the wires and the connectors just in case because you'll never know, but that's the beauty of opening up a harness. Even though it can be terrifying, if you're experienced enough, it allows you to move everything around and get some extra room and extra slack out of that thing so you can tuck wires where you want to. The JZ is definitely not going to be looking as nice as this, but I'm going to be trying. Especially with all the stuff that I'm buying, it's definitely going to be cleaning things up, and I'm all here for it. Super excited for what's to come. Just got to give the extra slack for those oxygen sensors, and I think I'm gonna start taping up the harness. It's gonna be very time consuming, so I'm not gonna be showing you guys the full process, but I do want to give you guys some tips and tricks on how to do it. So when you're applying tape on any sort of wiring, you don't want it to fold on itself because then it's just gonna look really bad and ugly. The whole point of this Tesa tape is for it to look nice and clean. So when we're applying it, we wanna make sure that we're keeping consistent pressure and overlapping half of the tape that you previously laid out so it covers a decent amount of wire. So it can look something like this. You guys are probably noticing that I'm not using any wire shielding. If your harness is around very hot things, I definitely recommend it. Obviously, some of my harness is, so I'm gonna be running into a risk for that. Nonetheless, this Tesa tape should be able to at least hold up some of the heat. Just a reminder, if you guys wanna go that route, you guys can. Come here. What's wrong?
I'm tired.
It's okay, come on. I understand.
What?
What?
What are you saying?
Nothing.
Just lie.
The harness was coming out good, but I ran into a problem. The whole big tape roll, I ran out. And I still need half the harness. It's starting to come out good, and I think this is a good point to leave off for the video because I can show you guys side by side how it looks taped and not taped. Luckily, I was able to get a decent amount done, and the way I set it up is I individualized each connector to give more room just in case I need to tuck things around the intake manifold, the alternator, things like that. But when it comes to the other harness, this is gonna be super fun because there are a lot of individual connectors. I might just have to wait till I put the intake manifold on so I can properly tuck the intake side. I just wanted to give you guys a gist of how to clean up your harness. I keep improving on my techniques, especially with the hard body. That's the car that I've been learning so much with. Transferring that knowledge onto this car and redoing it, it's getting really exciting. I'm excited to share that knowledge with you guys so you guys can do this on your car. This is where I'm gonna be leaving off for the video. I am starving, just like every Saturday night when we finish off the video, and I wanna go eat. Stephanie's hungry, she's tired, and we better eat before she gets grumpy.
It's too late.
I'm fucked. But let me know what you guys think. Hope you guys learned something. I ordered a bunch of parts that I probably shouldn't have. I was pressured by my colleagues to make this car even better than it already is. I'm excited for the 1JZ 2.0, and I'm also excited to take this damn hard body to the fabricator. This thing is rad. Definitely check out the build. On that note, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you guys on the next one.